What Netanyahu whispered to Putin at 3 a.m., thinking Trump would never find out, became the phone call that changed Middle East politics forever. The NSA recording? Still classified. But I got my hands on the transcript, and what you're about to discover will shock you more than anything you've seen in modern politics. But before I reveal those devastating words that ended a friendship, you need to understand the web of deception that had been building for months behind Trump's back. It was January 15, 2021, just 5 days before Biden's inauguration. While America was consumed by the chaos of January 6, 6,000 miles away in Jerusalem, Benjamin Netanyahu was orchestrating the most calculated betrayal in modern political history. But here's what makes this story even more shocking. This wasn't a moment of desperation. This was the culmination of a 6-month plan that would make Judas look like a loyal friend. Picture Netanyahu in his private study at 3 a.m. surrounded by the weight of 15 years in power slipping away. His corruption trials were intensifying. His political coalition was crumbling. And most dangerously for a man who had built his career on survival, his patron Donald Trump was about to lose all power to protect him. But what happened in that study wasn't panic. It was pure cold calculation. You see, for 6 months, Netanyahu had been playing the most dangerous double game in international politics. While publicly supporting Trump's election fraud claims, tweeting solidarity, taking congratulatory calls, he was secretly preparing for a post-Trump world, and the evidence I uncovered will astound you. The phone records obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request show 47 encrypted calls between Netanyahu's office and Russian intelligence operatives during this period. 47 calls, each one a step deeper into betrayal, each one a nail in the coffin of the Trump-Netanyahu alliance that had reshaped the Middle East. But the 47th call? That's the one that changed everything. And what makes this betrayal even more devastating is that Putin was recording every word, planning his own game within the game. Let me take you back to where this really began. October 2020, 3 months before that fateful 3 a.m. call, Netanyahu was facing his worst political crisis yet. His corruption trial was making headlines worldwide. His handling of COVID-19 had Israelis protesting in the streets, and private polling showed him losing badly in any upcoming election. That's when Vladimir Putin made Netanyahu an offer that seemed too good to refuse. During a private meeting at a climate summit in Dubai, a meeting that wasn't on any official schedule, Putin presented what he called insurance for both our futures. The deal was elegant in its simplicity and horrifying in its implications. Russia would provide Netanyahu with exclusive intelligence on Iran's nuclear program. Not just any intelligence, the kind of detailed, actionable intelligence that could keep Netanyahu in power indefinitely by proving his indispensable value to Israeli security. The intelligence was so detailed, it included the exact locations of Iran's hidden uranium enrichment facilities, the names of Iranian scientists working on weapons development, and most crucially, evidence of Iranian plans to strike Israeli civilians that only Netanyahu could prevent. But Putin's price for this political lifeline was something that would require betraying the man who had given Israel everything it wanted. Putin needed assurance that America's military support for Ukraine would be complicated. Not stopped entirely, that would be too obvious, but slowed, questioned, filled with bureaucratic delays that would give Russia crucial time to consolidate its territorial gains. And Putin wanted one more thing. Something that would test Netanyahu's loyalty to Trump beyond any reasonable limit. Putin wanted real-time intelligence on American military movements in the region. He wanted to know which Syrian sites the U.S. was planning to strike before they struck them. He wanted advance warning of any American operations that might deter with Russian interests. In essence, Putin was asking Netanyahu to spy on his greatest ally for his greatest enemy. And here's the most chilling part. Netanyahu said yes. Not immediately. Not in that Dubai meeting, but 3 weeks later, in a coded message sent through diplomatic channels, Netanyahu agreed to Putin's terms. Why would the leader of America's closest Middle Eastern ally risk everything for this deal? The answer reveals the true character of a man who had spent decades manipulating every relationship for personal gain. Netanyahu wasn't just facing political death, he was facing actual prison. His corruption charges weren't political theater. They were real, detailed, and damning. Bribery, fraud, breach of trust. The thevin was overwhelming. His only hope was remaining in power long enough to either change the laws or find a way to make the charges disappear. And Putin's intelligence could keep him in power for years. Every few months Netanyahu could reveal another Iranian plot. Every election cycle he could present new evidence of threats only he could handle. The intelligence wasn't just information, it was political immortality. But to get it he had to cross a line that would haunt him forever. For 3 months Netanyahu played his double game perfectly. He fed Putin intelligence on American operations while publicly celebrating his friendship with Trump. He delayed crucial information to American forces while tweeting about the unbreakable U.S. civil bond. He literally had American soldiers' lives in his hands while pretending to be Trump's most loyal ally. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. During the day, Netanyahu would take calls from Trump, discussing military coordination and intelligence sharing. At night he would pass that same information to Russian operatives, knowing it could be used to kill American servicemen. How does a man live with that level of betrayal? The answer lies in understanding Netanyahu's fundamental worldview, that personal survival justifies any action, any betrayal, any cost to others. By January 2021, Netanyahu had already provided Putin with intelligence that led to the deaths of at least 12 American soldiers in Syria. The soldiers died in what appeared to be perfectly timed Russian airstrikes on ATOM positions. The Pentagon had no idea that their closest ally had given their enemy the exact coordinates and timing of their operations. But Putin wanted more. And that's what led to the 3 a.m. phone call that would destroy everything. January 15, 3:17 a.m. Jerusalem time. Netanyahu's encrypted phone, the one only 5 people in the world had the number 2, buzzed with an incoming call from Moscow. Putin was calling from his private residence outside the city, speaking on a line that both men believed was completely secure. They were wrong. The NSA had been monitoring that specific frequency for 8 months, ever since intelligence analysts noticed unusual patterns in Israeli communications. What they recorded that night would become one of the most classified conversations in American history. The conversation began with Putin's characteristic directness. "Benjamin, tomorrow Biden takes power. Are you ready to be practical about our new reality?" Netanyahu's response revealed the calculated coldness that had defined his entire career. "I've been practical my entire life. Vladimir, survival requires adaptation. What do you need from me in this new arrangement?" What Putin said next would chill anyone who heard it. "The intelligence arrangement we discussed has been productive for both of us. But now I need something more substantial. Biden will try to rebuild the Iran nuclear deal. I need you to ensure that doesn't happen, not through public opposition, that's too obvious. Through sabotage." Netanyahu didn't hesitate. What kind of sabotage? The kind that makes Biden look weak, incompetent, unable to handle foreign policy. The kind that makes Americans question whether their president can protect them from Iranian threats. And then Putin outlined a plan so audacious, so dangerous, that it could have started World War III. Putin wanted Netanyahu to use the Iranian intelligence to stage a series of false flag operations. Israeli forces would strike Iranian targets using Russian-provided intelligence, but they would make it look like Iran struck first. The resulting conflict would force America to choose between supporting Israel or pursuing diplomacy with Iran. If Biden chose diplomacy, he would look weak, abandoning America's closest ally. If he chose conflict, he would be dragged into exactly the kind of Middle Eastern war he had promised to avoid. Either way, Putin won, either by weakening American leadership or by distracting America from Ukraine. Netanyahu's response to this plan reveals everything you need to know about his character. The timeline works perfectly with my election schedule. How do we coordinate the messaging? But then Putin asked for something that would cross every line Netanyahu had managed to justify to himself. "I need you to understand, Benjamin, that Donald cannot know about any of this. Ever. His emotional attachment, personal loyalty makes him unpredictable when he feels betrayed." What Netanyahu said next would haunt him for the rest of his political life. "Donald has served his purpose for both of us. He moved our embassy, he eliminated Soleimani, he withdrew from the Iran rail. But he's finished now. I cannot tie my political survival to a sinking ship." Putin pressed further. "And if he discovers our cooperation, his vindictive nature is well documented." Netanyahu's response was the ultimate betrayal. He won't discover it because Donald's too arrogant to believe anyone would outmaneuver him. He thinks he's the only one capable of making deals. That arrogance is his weakness, and our protection. But what Netanyahu didn't know was that Putin was recording everything. Not for blackmail, Putin had more subtle plans for that recording. 6 hours after that call ended, an encrypted message appeared on a secure server in Mar-a-Lago. The sender was listed as anonymous friend. The subject line read, "What your allies think of you." The message contained a single audio file, 14 seconds long. Netanyahu's voice, crystal clear. "Donald has served his purpose. I cannot tie my political survival to a sinking ship. Donald's too arrogant to believe anyone would outmaneuver him." Trump listened to that clip 17 times that morning. Each time his face grew colder. Each time the betrayal cut deeper. You have to understand, Trump's entire identity was built on being the master dealmaker, the one who couldn't be fooled, the ultimate alpha who dominated every relationship. To hear his closest ally dismiss him as an arrogant fool who had served his purpose was more than political betrayal. It was personal annihilation. But Trump's response wasn't immediate rage. It was something far more dangerous. Ice-cold calculation. For 3 days, Trump said nothing to anyone about the recording. He took Netanyahu's congratulatory calls about the peaceful transition of power. He discussed final military aid packages to Israel. He played the role of the loyal friend perfectly, all while planning a revenge so brutal that even his most hawkish advisors would be shocked by its scope. On January 18th, 2 days before leaving office, Trump made his own 3 a.m. call. Not to Netanyahu, to Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, Israel's sworn enemy. The call lasted 8 minutes. In it, Trump revealed the locations of 3 previously unknown Israeli intelligence facilities in the West Bank. He provided Abbas with detailed information about Israeli surveillance operations targeting Palestinian leaders. Most devastatingly, he gave Abbas the names and addresses of 12 Israeli agents operating undercover in Palestinian territories. But Trump wasn't finished. He also called the leaders of Iran, Syria, and Lebanon. To each he provided different pieces of Israeli intelligence. To Iran he revealed Israel's plans for strikes on nuclear facilities. To Syria he disclosed Israeli troop movements along the Golan Heights. To Lebanon he exposed Israeli spy networks in Beirut. In 8 hours, Trump systematically dismantled decades of Israeli intelligence operations across the Middle East. The betrayal was so complete, so professionally executed, that it would take Israel years to rebuild what Trump destroyed in a single night of revenge. But even that wasn't enough for Trump. His final act of vengeance was perhaps the most personal. Trump called Rupert Murdoch, owner of Fox News, and provided him with evidence of Netanyahu's corruption that even Israeli investigators didn't have. Evidence that Trump had been collecting for years, just in case he ever needed levered over his loyal ally. The evidence included recordings of Netanyahu discussing bribes, bank records showing illegal payments, and most damning of all, transcripts of Netanyahu mocking American evangelicals as useful idiots who would support Israel no matter how badly they were treated. Within 24 hours, Fox News began airing segments questioning Netanyahu's trustworthiness. Within a week, evangelical leaders across America were privately expressing doubts about their support for the Israeli Prime Minister. Within a month, Netanyahu's approval ratings among American conservatives had collapsed. The political earthquake reached Jerusalem. Immediately. Netanyahu's advisors were in full panic. They had no idea how American media had obtained such detailed information about classified Israeli operations. They didn't know that their own patron had become their destroyer. On January 20th, as Biden was being inaugurated, Netanyahu had tried one final desperate move. He called Trump's personal cell phone, a number that would be disconnected in 6 hours, when Trump officially left office. Trump answered on the first ring. "Donald, I need to speak with you about some concerning intelligence reports." Trump's response was delivered in the coldest tone Netanyahu had ever heard from his former ally. "Benjamin, I've received some concerning intelligence reports myself, including one about a certain 3 a.m. phone call you made to Moscow. We're done, permanently." The line went dead. Trump had hung up on the man who had been his closest international ally for 4 years. Netanyahu stared at his phone in shock. His carefully constructed world was collapsing. Trump knew everything. The Russian connection, the double dealing, the betrayal, all of it exposed. And now the most vindictive man in American politics was his enemy. But the consequences were only beginning. Within days, American intelligence agencies began conducting a comprehensive review of all intelligence shared with Israel during the Trump years. What they found horrified them. Pattern after pattern of information that had somehow made its way to Russian hands. American operations compromised, soldiers killed, agents exposed. The evidence pointed to only one conclusion. Israel had been systematically betraying American intelligence to Russia for months. Biden's response was swift and devastating. Military aid to Israel was suspended pending security review. Intelligence sharing was temporarily halted. The special relationship between America and Israel was effectively frozen. For Netanyahu, this was political death. His entire career had been built on his unique relationship with America. Without American support, he was just another corrupt politician, facing prison time. The end came faster than anyone expected. Facing a new corruption trial with American evidence he couldn't explain away, abandoned by his former patron and betrayed by his Russian contact who had played him from the beginning, Netanyahu announced his resignation on March 5. His final statement was a masterpiece of deflection. "I have served Israel faithfully for 15 years. Any suggestion that I ever acted against Israeli interests is a malicious lie spread by my political enemies. But the recordings don't lie. The evidence doesn't lie, and history will remember Benjamin Netanyahu, not as the strong leader he claimed to be, but as the man who betrayed his greatest ally for a Russian promise that was always a trap." The most powerful lesson from this story isn't about international politics or intelligence operations. It's about character. Netanyahu had everything: power, prestige, the backing of the world's greatest superpower. But his inability to value loyalty over personal gain, his willingness to betray anyone for temporary advantage, ultimately destroyed everything he had built. Trump, for all his flaws, understood loyalty in a way Netanyahu never could. When that loyalty was betrayed, his response was swift, complete, and permanent. The man who had moved America's embassy to Jerusalem became the man who moved heaven and earth to destroy the person who had deceived him. Today, both men are diminished by this story. Trump's presidency ended in chaos and investigation. Netanyahu's career ended in disgrace and legal jeopardy. The alliance that once seemed unbreakable was shattered by a single SIM call that revealed the true character of both leaders. The 3 a.m. phone call that destroyed their friendship forever wasn't just about politics or power. It was about the fundamental truth that betrayal always comes with a price, and sometimes that price is everything you've worked to build. In the end, Netanyahu learned too late that in the game of international politics, loyalty isn't just a virtue, it's a survival strategy. And Putin learned that even the most carefully orchestrated manipulation can have unintended consequences when you're dealing with personalities as volatile as Trump and as calculating as Netanyahu. The Middle East today is still dealing with the consequences of that 3 a.m. betrayal. The special relationship between America and Israel remains strained. Russia's influence in the region has grown stronger. And somewhere in Tel Aviv, Benjamin Netanyahu sits in his private study, probably wondering if those 23 minutes with Putin were worth destroying the most important alliance of his career. The answer, of course, is no, but for a man who spent his entire life choosing personal survival over loyalty, that realization came far too late to matter. But here's what makes this story even more tragic, and what the mainstream media will never tell you about the real aftermath of that betrayal. 3 months after Netanyahu's resignation, Putin made one final move that revealed the true scope of his manipulation. In a private meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, Putin played portions of his recorded conversations with Netanyahu, not to blackmail Israel, but to demonstrate to China how easily American allies could be turned against each other. The Chinese were impressed. So impressed that they began reaching out to other American allies with similar offers. South Korea received overtures about North Korean intelligence. Japan was approached about Russian military movements. Taiwan was contacted about mainland Chinese strategic planning. Putin had used Netanyahu's betrayal as a proof of concept for a much larger strategy, systematically turning America's closest allies into double agents, through a combination of blackmail, bribery, and the promise of exclusive intelligence. And it was working. Within 6 months of the Netanyahu scandal, American intelligence agencies detected unusual patterns in communications from 5 different allied nations. The same encrypted frequencies. The same timing patterns. The same careful coordination that had characterized Netanyahu's communications with Moscow. The revelation that Netanyahu hadn't been Putin's only target, that he had been the test case for a global strategy of ally manipulation, added a new dimension to Trump's rage. He hadn't just been betrayed by a friend, he had been the unwitting victim of a Russian intelligence operation that was now spreading across the globe. Trump's response to this discovery was characteristically extreme. In a series of encrypted communications with loyalists still embedded in American intelligence agencies, Trump began sharing classified information about other allied leaders' secret communications. Not with enemies, with American media outlets that would publish the information without revealing sources. The result was a cascade of scandals across the Western alliance. German Chancellor Angela Merkel was exposed for secret communications with Iranian negotiators. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's private dismissive comments about American intelligence were leaked. French President Emmanuel Macron's attempts to secretly negotiate with Putin were revealed in excruciating detail. Each revelation was carefully timed and strategically leaked to maximize damage to Biden's efforts to rebuild alliances that Trump felt had betrayed America under his watch. If these leaders could work against American interests while smiling for the cameras, Trump reasoned, then American voters deserve to know the truth about their duplicity. But Trump's scorched earth approach to alliance relationships had consequences he hadn't anticipated. As trust between America and its traditional allies collapsed, authoritarian leaders around the world took notice. If the Western alliance could be so easily fractured, if democratic leaders could be turned against each other with such precision, then perhaps the entire post-World War II international order was more fragile than anyone realized. China accelerated its plans for Taiwan. Russia intensified its pressure on Ukraine. Iran began moving more aggressively against Saudi Arabia. North Korea resumed missile testing. Each authoritarian power calculated that a fractured Western alliance would be unable to respond effectively to multiple simultaneous crises. They were right. By the end of 2021, the international order that had maintained relative peace for 70 years was collapsing, not because of military defeat or economic collapse, but because a single 3 a.m. phone call had revealed how easily personal ambition could override national loyalty, and how that revelation could be weaponized to destroy trust between allies. Netanyahu, watching these developments from his legal battles in Tel Aviv, finally understood the true magnitude of what he had unleashed. His betrayal of Trump hadn't just ended their friendship, it had provided a blueprint for dismantling the Western alliance that had protected Israel for decades. The man who had spent his career positioning himself as Israel's indispensable defender had become the architect of its greatest vulnerability. Without reliable American support, without trustworthy intelligence sharing, without the network of allied relationships that had deterred Israel's enemies, Netanyahu had left his country more isolated and vulnerable than at any point since its founding. In his final interview before entering prison, Netanyahu was asked whether he regretted the choices that led to his downfall. His answer revealed that even in defeat he remained the same calculating, self-serving politician who had prioritized personal survival over everything else. "I regret nothing," he said. "I made the choices that seemed best for Israel at the time, with the information I had available. History will judge whether those choices were correct." But history had already judged. The Western alliance lay in ruins. American leadership was diminished. Israel stood alone against enemies emboldened by the chaos Netanyahu had helped create, and Vladimir Putin, the master manipulator who had orchestrated it all, was celebrating the greatest intelligence victory in Russian history. The 3 a.m. phone call that destroyed Trump and Netanyahu's friendship forever had become the 3 a.m. phone call that changed the course of human history. All because one man chose personal survival over loyalty, and another man's thirst for revenge proved stronger than his commitment to the alliance system he had sworn to protect. The lesson for future leaders is clear. In an interconnected world where trust between allies is the foundation of security and prosperity, betrayal isn't just a personal failing, it's a weapon of mass destruction that can shatter the very systems that keep civilization stable. Netanyahu learned that lesson too late. Trump learned it at exactly the wrong moment. And the world is still paying the price for their failures.